Welcome to this lecture on developing and marketing new products. We are going to first introduce the concept of innovation and why innovation of products is needed. And then we are going to discuss methods for new product development, and we will finish by sharing some remarks on how to market new products. Let's start by understanding why innovation is important today. So, of course, companies compete based on different strategies. These strategies include prices, they include innovation of products, they include, for example, strong marketing of products or services. Innovation is one of these, and therefore today there is a great interest from companies to innovate their products, innovate their processes, and innovate their business models. In this lecture, we only focus on the innovation of products. There are some dynamics happening today in markets. One of these dynamics is, of course, the increasing use of technologies and the significant developments made by technology. Every year, technology changes significantly and offers new opportunities for product development. Also, there is a lot of pressure coming from competitors, and this pressure has particularly increased with the globalization phenomenon of the last 20 years. So, competitors are not anymore only located in your country, but are really located everywhere. In this context, companies, in order to develop a competitive advantage, in order to build profitable and sustainable businesses, need innovation can use innovation as a driver for success. Now, in reference to specifically to product innovation, there are three main aspects we need to discuss, and we are going to discuss. The first one is that the product life cycle is shortening increasingly over time, and this is something of course important, because the consequence of this is that companies need to innovate more. The second aspect is that the number of products and new products on the markets is increasing a lot. And last, the fact that segmentation is becoming very extreme. So products go on the market with different characteristics in order to really cover all the needs of the market. Let's go over these three aspects one by one. So, the shortening of a product life cycle. A good example to look at is mobile phones. Mobile phones today have a very short life cycle. The life cycle of a mobile phone is typically in the range of 2 to 3 years. In this presentation, we will refer pretty often to the case of Apple computers and Apple products, because of course is a well-known innovative companies pushing a lot innovation of products, and therefore we can learn a lot from the case. So if you consider, for example, the case of the iPhone, the first version of the iPhone was launched in 2007, the second one in 2008, the third one in 2009, the 3GS. iPhone 4 came into the market in 2010, iPhone 4S 2011, and then we had the iPhone 5 on 2012. So basically what is happening is that the life cycle of the iPhone is really 1 year. So Apple is pushing a new product on the market every year. And this is, is of course a sign of how innovation is important to Apple in order to compete on the mobile phone market. Regarding the aspect of the number of new products in the market, again, this is remarkable. Statistics data show that about 5,000 new products appear in the market every year, even if most of these fail in succeeding in the market. So only 20% of these presents success in the market. What this means is that companies need, of course, to develop new products and do innovation of products, but also it's very important to understand what is the request from the market. Otherwise, the risk is that you develop new products that do not respond to specific needs of the market and therefore fail on the market. Segmentation is becoming more extreme. As you know, segmentation is a marketing concept, strategic marketing concept, is about how do you decide to position your product on the market. So, for example, what kind of price do you want to apply to your products? Are you designing the product for a young audience or for older people? So basically, you decide what segment of the market, in what segment of the market you want to compete. Now, today there is evidence that companies develop several products to cover several products with similar functionality to cover more segments of the market, and the segmentation is becoming very extreme. So companies really need to keep innovation to maintain their position in these small segments. And something, of course, they use to support this is marketing. So marketing is something that always works along with innovation. An interesting case, for example, is the case of Unilever. Unilever offers several commercial products, and it's impressive what kind of budgets they have for marketing of very basic food products. And the need of such huge marketing budgets is because even if you have a good product, that is not enough. You need to push marketing in order to make the product successful in the market. Now, innovation of products, new product development is something very complex. So, innovation itself is a process that companies need to understand and learn, and understanding the rules and phases of this process is essential to succeed in innovation. Something that is very important to understand is that in order to develop a successful product on the market, a huge number of ideas need to be generated, and several tests and prototypations need to be carried out in order to achieve the final version of the product with the right features. So there is a popular research that has been published a number of years ago by an academic from Wharton Business School, Karl Ulrich. He is one of the leading scholars in the field of innovation of products, and basically in this research he reported that in order to launch a successful product, a successful commercial product on the market, 3,000 raw ideas need to be generated in order to get there. This is well known as the funnel of innovation. So here in the picture you can see that innovation is really made by stages. So you start by generating a large number of ideas, then you do a short listing of these ideas, you launch small projects to understand if these ideas are good or not, and then at that point you engage with the development, with the design of new products, and at a certain point you can go into the market. But the idea is that there is evidence, there are data showing that starting from 3,000 raw ideas, only one product, only one idea becomes a commercial idea. Innovation sources. Of course, there are many sources companies can use in order to perform the innovation activity inside the company. Sources can be inside the business, employees, engineers, inventors, but also outside. So for example, you can perform innovation by collaborating with your suppliers, or you can engage in collaboration with other companies in order to develop new products, and so on. So innovation is something really open, and companies need to understand what are the potential sources for innovating products, and need to facilitate innovation inside the business. As I said, classic internal innovation sources are people of your organization. So this is something important, because it means that when you hire new people in your corporation, you also want to search for specific skills, and these skills might include creativity, might include an open mindset, might include the capability of collaborating with others, characteristics that are useful in the context of innovation. As I said, also innovation is a process itself, so you need to create an organization for innovation. You need to create processes and procedures that facilitate innovation. There are many cases in literature of companies that develop particular practices. For example, it's well known that 3M, the American company, gives 10% 10% of the working time to its employees to engage with the development of new ideas. This means employees can work on their own projects, and their own projects could become new products of the corporation. So there are different ways to facilitate innovation. And it's very important that a company creates the right infrastructure and the right environment for innovation. What is the typical profile of an inventor? Well, typically they are, of course, strong in their sector. So let's say, for example, we are in the food industry. They have an understanding, of course, a deep understanding of food products, but typically they also have an understanding of other sectors. And this is something very important, because often innovation is about implementing ideas that have been used in a different context in a new context. So knowledge of different sectors is something that is pretty common in an inventor profile. The second aspect, the second characteristic, is that typically inventors are really pushed by curiosity. So they do not really they are typically more interested in problems than solutions. And this is an important aspect, because curiosity is, of course, a driver for creativity, and creativity is a driver for innovation. The third characteristic of an inventor is that typically they are more attracted by integrated solutions than local ones. This means they typically focus on the big picture of problems, and they try to develop solutions that tend to be pretty radical solutions. Another source of innovation can be customers. So there are a lot of examples of new products that have been developed by users, or cases of corporations that develop new products through customers. The snowboard is an example of a new product, of an innovative product that was developed by users. In fact, three people contributed to the development of the snowboard, and these were users that were bored of skiing, and therefore started modifying the traditional skiing equipment, and at a certain point they realized something that was very similar to the today shape of a snowboard. A similar case is the Gatorade bottle, that, as you know, has a very particular packaging and opening mechanism. This bottle was again developed by users. In this case, were runners that, when they run, they don't have the time to open the cap of a bottle, and therefore created a new opening mechanism that it's easier, because you can open it with your teeth without needing your hands. And these are great examples of how innovation, development of new products can be pushed or performed by users. There is a lot of literature on this kind of approaches, and this is typically this case of innovation led by users is typically called in literature the lead user approach. Now, of course, research and development is a traditional approach to the innovation of products. In many companies, you will find a research and development office or department. What is important to understand is that there are two kinds of research. There is a theoretical research and applied research. Theoretical research focuses on very large problems and typically is looking at solutions to these problems that do not have an immediate short-term practical implication. This means you might, for example, develop a new theory for constructing a bridge, but this theory doesn't find immediate application in the industrial market. In applied research is the opposite. You try to develop solutions to problems that immediately go into the market. So in this case is more industry oriented. Typically companies try to engage with both. Why? Because of course applied research can bring to more successful solutions in the short term, but theoretical research can bring to more innovative, more radical innovations for the long term. So it's good to have a balanced approach and combine both applied research with theoretical research. Another important aspect that is important to mention is the link between innovation and marketing. This means how companies approach the innovation activity and how companies use marketing as an input for the innovation activity. Substantially, there are two approaches. The first is called market push and the second is called market pull. Let's start from the second one. Market pull means that the company develop innovation processes, develop new products based on inputs that have been discovered, that have been collected from the market. So, for example, companies carry out market researches, investigate what potential customers expect from new products, and based on this information, develop new products. This is called a market pull approach. The other possibility is that companies engage with a market push approach. This means they do not investigate what the market is looking for, but they develop new products and services simply based on their vision. So basically they push new products or they push new solutions in the market. Often companies apply both, so adopt both market pushes and market pull approaches. Now let's try to discuss how we can classify the different forms of innovation. The most common criteria are based on four categories of innovation: by nature, by intensity, by the effect on competencies, and by the destination. So we are going to discuss all these four possible forms of classification. The first one, by nature, is it refers to the focus of innovation, and typically this distinguishes between innovation of products, innovation of processes, that is also called business process reengineering, and innovation of business models. So when you typically study an entire course on innovation management, you study these three aspects of innovation. The second possible classification is by intensity. And in this case, the two categories are radical innovation or incremental innovation. What they means? Radical innovation means that you are really creating something new, something that typically is not in the market, something that is going to change the way we do things. So, for example, in reference to the iPhone, the first iPhone was really a radical innovation because it was the first mobile phone, the first smartphone with a completely different set of features, including the cameras, including the possibility of connecting to the internet, including the possibility of checking emails and so on. So it was a completely new product. That was a radical innovation. Then Apple developed further versions of the iPhones. Basically, these versions represent an improvement of the product, but do not represent a radical innovation. So in this case, the iPhone 2, the iPhone 3 and the iPhone 4 are examples of an incremental innovation. As you can understand, the effort is different because, of course, it's easier to do an incremental innovation than a radical innovation, so also the investments are different, and also the impact on the market is totally different. Of course, introducing a completely new product, a radical innovation on the market, can be very profitable for a company. The third possible classification is based on the effect on competencies, and basically in this case you can distinguish between competence enhancing or competence destroying. Now, what this means? This means that companies of course always look for business opportunities, and if they identify business opportunities, engage with them. So for example, let's say you are a company that manufactures TV screens. You could identify a business opportunity in the market that is about developing a new generation of TV screens with a different technology from the one you are using. So, for example, let's say the case of moving from LED technology to plasma technology. In that case, you are not destroying your competency on developing and manufacturing TV screens. So you are approaching an innovation process that is actually going to enhance your competencies. If you are for example, a TV manufacturer and you engage in the development of a mobile phone, okay, because there is a business opportunity in the market and you want to get that opportunity, in that case, probably that process of innovation is not going to make use of the previous innovation engineering competencies you have in-house, but substantially is going to destroy that competencies and you are going to build new competencies. So in that case, is an innovation that is classified as competence destroying. The last possible classification is based on the destination, if it's a modular innovation or it's an architectural innovation. This means if you are applying your innovation product, your innovation process to the entire structure of the entire architecture of the product or to specific components of the product. So to give an example, a company like Apple, focuses on architectural innovation. So they define the macro aspects of the phone, but then often the innovation, the development of the specific components is made by the suppliers of Apple, is not made by Apple itself. So suppliers work on modular innovation, Apple works on architectural innovation. So again, often you have a combination of these things. Something that is important to note, again, this is evidence from data and from literature, is the fact that both technological rate of improvement and the diffusion rate of new products follow S curves. Now this is very important because what it means is that new technologies of course offer a certain potential, but basically there is evidence that new technologies stay on the market only for certain windows of time. So after a technology is over, after a technology is old, a new technology arrives into the market and substitutes that technology. And the rate of improvement, so for example, the rate of improving, Wi-Fi systems follows an S curve. Now, a similar type of curve is related to the diffusion of a new product into the market. So when a new product is launched, is introduced into the market, typically the diffusion is pretty slow. Then there is a boom into the market, and when the product becomes old, the diffusion decreases significantly. So both the technological rate of improvement and the diffusion rate follows this kind of shape, this kind of curve into the market. Now, this concept of the S curve is very important because can be used by managers as a planning tool. This means you need to be aware that products have a certain life cycle. So you need to be aware, for example, that a certain technology is going to become old after a while, and therefore you need to develop innovation processes that take into consideration the understanding of this phenomenon, and you are going to introduce new products before the products that are your products that are in the market becomes old. Now, there is another important concept that we need to introduce in the environment of innovation, which is the concept of a dominant design. This is an important concept particularly for engineers and inventors. Now, let's take, for example, the case of a car. Have you ever reflected why a car has four wheels, four tires? Basically, engineers, of course, try to, when they are in the innovation process, try to study different configurations in order to improve and innovate the product. But there is evidence that at a certain point, all designs converge forward a certain dominant design. So mechanical engineers have tried several times to imagine a car with 5 wheels or 3 wheels or 6 wheels, but in practice, when analyzing these solutions, they always found that the best solution, the most optimized design, is a car with 4 wheels. So this is something important to know, because especially when you try to push radical innovation, architectural innovation, you might try to change the dominant design, but of course, changing the dominant design of something, it's not easy. So I want to give you another example. If you look at the mobile market today, substantially there are 2 dominant designs. There is the design, or the dominant design, that was introduced by Apple, that is the design of a mobile phone with a very large screen, a flat mobile phone with touch screen, and the dominant design of BlackBerry, which is a completely different architecture of the product. If you look at all mobile phone models in the market, they substantially refer to these 2 dominant designs. Another important another important concept to understand is the one of externalities. So, for example, if you consider the value of an iPhone or the value of an iPad, is not only the product itself, but is what you can do with the product. Is the fact that you have millions of applications you can easily download and use in your iPhone or iPad. Now, these applications are called externalities. This means are additional features that create additional value for your product. What is interesting, for example, in this case, is the business model that was developed by Apple, because Apple produces the products, but externalities are produced by others. So in this case, you create a very win-win situation in terms of innovation and product development. This concept of externalities is important for assessing the success of products, because the value of an innovation is not only made by the standalone value of the product, but is also made by the value of externalities. So Apple was the first one basically launching tablets and smartphones and bringing into the market this innovation of applications. When, for example, Samsung tried to enter that market, initially they had a lot of problems, because they had a good product, they had a good mobile phones and tablets, but at that time they were missing the externalities. This means the number of applications for Android was significantly lower than the number of applications for Apple products. So the total value was perceived as lower. It's also important to understand how do you want to approach innovation in terms of what kind of player do you want to be in the market. There are some companies that always try to be the first movers in the market. Apple is one of them. They push a lot innovation. But there are also other companies that wait competitors to introduce the products and then follow. So typically you can identify 3 categories of players: first movers, early followers, and late entrant. Now, There are advantages and disadvantages in these three approaches. For example, there are advantages and disadvantages in terms of marketing. If you are a first mover, probably it's going to be easier for you to build a brand. This is going to be harder for early followers and late entrants. Also, from a financial perspective, this is different because first movers, in order to introduce products, do large investments. If the products are not immediately successful on the market, they might enter into financial troubles. In the case of early followers, the risk is reduced because there is already awareness if the market likes or not a product, and therefore early followers can reduce the cost of investments to produce the new products, and at the same time the risk is reduced in terms of potential success of the new product into the market. Late entrant is another possible. To be a late entrant is another possible strategy. This means you enter into a market when substantially the life cycle of a product is very close to the end. Typically, late entrants compete based on price with very aggressive price strategies. And in order to do that, really develop business models and industrial activities that are based in the concept of economies of scale. This means they push low prices. They are able to push low prices because they achieve high volumes. And high volumes allow them to better allocate the fixed costs of the organization. Innovation calls for investments. There is evidence that companies that want to be innovative, companies that want to be first movers into markets need to engage with large investments. Here on this slide you can find a ranking of the top investing companies. What you will note is that you can find, for example, automotive companies at the top of this ranking. You can find high-tech companies, and also you find many pharmaceutical companies. Innovation in the pharmaceutical industry is something very complex. So typically pharmaceutical companies do large investments in order to innovate, to develop new drugs. So just to give you an idea of the budgets for innovation, in most of the companies, of traditional companies, budgets for innovation are in the order of 2-3% of the revenue. In the case of large companies that push R&D, like for example companies in the chemical industry, in the computer industry, in aerospace, in the automotive industry, you can find values around 4-5% of the revenue is dedicated to R&D activity. And then in the case of very R&D intensive sectors, for example biotechnology industry or semiconductors industry, you might find that these companies are investing up to 20% of their revenue on in research and development activity. Now, innovation is such a complex activity that typically calls for collaboration. This means companies develop a network approach to innovation. They engage with other firms, with other partners in order to develop new products and new services. Of course, the possible forms of collaboration differ significantly and can include, for example, joint ventures, licensing, outsourcing processes, or collaborating with research organizations. And all these possible forms of collaboration, of course, have different advantages and disadvantages. Now, it's also interesting to analyze how companies select innovation projects. This means what kind of methodologies companies use in order to decide in which projects, in which ideas they want to invest their money. There are a number of methodologies. We are not going to enter in detail in this lecture, but you can find a description of these methodologies in the course book, in the course textbook. And basically, there are substantially two options. There are quantitative models and there are qualitative approaches to this decision. There is also a very interesting methodology that I encourage you to study, which is a methodology called conjoint analysis. Conjoint analysis is a very interesting approach because it's a methodology that takes into consideration at the same time marketing information and engineering information in order to decide how to develop new products. Of course, innovation calls for protection. If you if you are a company that is, for example, developing a radical innovation of a product, you want to protect that innovation. There are different ways to do that. Of course, there are patents that apply to products, copyrights that applies to, for example, different kind of content. For example, texts is something you can cover with copyrights, or also brands can be registered. Intellectual property rights is an important aspect of the innovation activity because innovation calls for large investments and therefore companies want to defend their innovations. Now, it's also interesting to understand how corporates that operate globally approach innovation. There are different strategies. In the literature, you typically find four strategies that are center for global, local for local, locally leveraged, or globally linked. What these approaches mean? If you take a company like McDonald's, they operate globally and they are well known for being a company that really standardizes its operations and its products. While the menu of McDonald's is substantially the same everywhere, if you travel, you will discover that, for example, the same burgers in different countries might present slightly different tastes. Why? Because they adapt the burgers, they adapt the products to the local market needs. So, for example, if you go in Mexico, you will find that they offer burgers that are more spicy from the American ones. Now, how they approach these decisions? This is something interesting because there are different methodologies. Some companies develop a center for global strategy. This means, let's say you have an headquarter in Europe. From Europe, you develop new products that go all over around the world. This means the innovation activity, the new product development activity is centralized in one location. Or another approach is local for local. This means in each country you have an R&D unit, so different countries develop different products for the local market. Or you might have an approach which is locally leveraged. This means when a particular product is innovated somewhere and this innovation is successful in a certain local market, at that point you bring that innovation at the global level. So you diffuse that product, that new product everywhere. The last approach is called globally linked. This means you have research and development units located in different countries and they collaborate together to develop new products that are launched globally. Now let's see what are the traditional stages in new product development. There is a company that is well known in the commercial market, which is IDEO. IDEO is a company that is based in the United States but has offices worldwide, and they are specialized in innovation of products. This means they do innovation for many corporates, including Nike, including Apple Computers, including Sony, including many companies of many industries. And their approach to innovation is so successful that their approach has been basically studied, and today is a part of the theory, is in literature as a method for product development. Let me show you first a video that introduces how IDEO approaches the development of new products, and then we are going to comment the video. Okay, so you saw that IDEO is a very interesting environment, and basically the IDEO methodology for new product development is substantially made by 5 steps. Step number 1 is to understand the needs of the market. Step number 2 is to observe how customers or users use existing products and what are the problems connected to existing products. Step number 3 is to visualize and predict the characteristics of the new product. Step number 4 is to evaluate different designs and refine the final design. And step number 5 is to implement the new design. This approach is today largely used by many corporations around the world to carry out the new product development activity. Now, let's make some final remarks around this process of innovation. First of all, the first remark I want to make is what are the generic objectives of an innovation activity, in reference, of course, to innovation of products. Number one, customer satisfaction. This is something very important. Often, the process of incremental innovation, this means updating products, is really aiming at customer satisfaction, is really aiming at solving problems that are highlighted by customers. And customer satisfaction is important because it's a driver of revenue, is a driver of profitability in a business. Another classic goal of the innovation activity is the goal of time reduction. Why? Because time to market is an essential factor. So not only you want to have new products, you want to develop new products, but also you want to do it as fast as possible. Why? Because as fast as you enter into a market, the sooner you could generate new revenue from that products. So time is an important parameter in the innovation activity. The last aspect is cost control. Of course, a key goal, a central goal of companies is to generate profits. In order to generate profits, they need to develop products that present margins. This means that the cost need to be contained as much as possible. So an important criteria in new product development is also the analysis of costs, because you will explore different solutions in order to also manage the trade-off with costs. Now, there are the innovation process, so the steps for example, the steps that are proposed by IDEO or other innovation frameworks can be carried out in some cases in sequence, but also in some cases in parallel. So for example, let's say you have designed your product and now you need to design the manufacturing process. These two stages, these two steps can be carried out in sequence or can be carried out with a certain level of overlapping. What is the advantage of doing these processes in sequence or in parallel? In sequence, of course, you have a great control of the stages, so you can really be sure that when you move into the next stage is because you successfully completed the previous stage. In the case you run these stages, these phases in parallel, you basically create an element of risk in the innovation process, because you might engage with activities that without knowing the successful completion of the previous stage. So you might start working on the design of the manufacturing process without having completed the product design. In the unlucky case that something goes wrong in the product design, the investments that you have carried out for the design of the manufacturing processes are going to be lost. So it's very important to put great emphasis on control in the case you develop processes in parallel. Another well-known methodology is called the stage gate approach. This means after the end of each stage, you create a formal moment of analysis to analyze if you can proceed to the next stage. You perform a cost analysis to make sure that the product you are developing is going to be economically viable, and you substantially analyze the potential success of the product at every stage of the innovation process. Now, let's end this lecture by commenting some aspects of marketing in relation to the launch of new products. The first important marketing aspect we need to discuss is timing. When you develop a new product, it's also very important to analyze when you should introduce the product in the market. So, for example, let's take the example of consoles like PlayStation. The best period to introduce them in the market is Christmas. So typically these products are introduced in the market around October, so potential buyers become aware of the characteristics of the new product, and typically the boom of sales is in Christmas period. So timing is very specific for these kind of products. Now, this is a timing, is an information coming from marketing, but this information is also essential to product developers. Why? Because if marketing tells you that you need to introduce the product in October, you need to organize your innovation and R&D activities in a way that for sure the product will be ready by October. This timing aspect is very important and calls for collaboration between marketing and R&D units inside an organization. Another aspect we need to discuss is the concept of cannibalization of products. What this means. We said at the beginning of this session that Apple is introducing new versions of iPhone every year. Now, when Apple introduces a new version of the iPhone, substantially kills the sales of the previous model. What is interesting is that they have a model where the old version of the iPhone stays on the market for another period. So they have both the old and the new versions of the iPhone in the market at the same time. Now, even if the new product partially cannibalizes the sales of the old products, they decide to go for that, and the reason for this, the reason for that is the fact that Apple wants to be perceived in the market as a company that performs innovation, as a very innovative company, and therefore they do not care to partially kill the possible sales of an old product by introducing a new product. Other companies take different decisions, so they leave products in the markets until the end of the life cycle, and only when the life cycle is completely over they introduce a new product. Of course, this marketing strategy of cannibalization of products has several financial implications that need to be analyzed with great attention. The last marketing element I want to discuss in relation to the innovation and launch of new products is a marketing strategy known as the announcement strategy. Now, Again, here a great example of this strategy is Apple. They typically announce and present the characteristics of the new products a couple of months before the product is actually introduced into the market. So often they present the products in very popular large events in June or July, and these products arrive in the market in September. This is a specific marketing strategy aiming to reduce the possibility that a potential customer purchases another product. So the announcement strategy is something very common in some industries, for example also the automotive industry, and is something that is used to facilitate the diffusion of a new product in the market by limiting the possibility that customers purchase another product because they are not aware that a new product is coming in the market.